Hi there, so it's Matt from I Private Tuition. Just want to talk about some UCAS Personal Statement stuff advice today, um, mainly for applications to science-based things like biology, biomed and the related fields, because I've been helping some people recently and there's a theme with perhaps for the advice that I'm giving out to try and get help with specific parts to make their application stand out compared to other people, because there might be hundreds if not thousands of people applying for your places, and to make sure basically that that you stand out, you're top of the pile when you talk to the admissions tutor on that piece of paper, that you come across as someone who they want, that they think is going to be passionate and dedicated to their courses, and to make sure that basically you've got the best chance to get in there, as well as your predicted grades hopefully, and that therefore that means you might get into the degree course or the institution that you specifically want, as well as then hopefully that means it's going to be the stepping stone to the career option or maybe the jobs and things that you want in the future. So I'm assuming by this point that you've decided where you want to apply, whether that's somewhere like Newcastle or York or Sheffield or wherever else in the country you might be thinking about for biomed or equivalent, and that you've been on the UCAS website, you've looked at the requirements for the 4,000 characters, the 47 lines, and all the other bits and bobs for the normal part of the application, like your educational history, GCSE results, predicted A levels, things like that. So it's basically just the personal statement stuff, because you can do the other things pretty much on your own through the help from the website or even your personal tutor, etc. So it's your chance to sell yourself. It's a bit like if you went for part-time or a full-time job. Maybe you've probably already done that, many of you, where you've got a CV and you on paper is being sold to get you to that interview, to show that why you have the skills or the experience or the dedication to basically get past the post, to make sure that you're a worthy candidate for interview. Because if they don't think you're a worthy candidate for interview, both in personal statements and in job sessions, you won't actually get the invite in itself. So in terms of competition, there's going to be lots and lots of people possibly applying for your place, and that you need to make sure that you're ahead of the pile, that you've got the best legs to stand on. And how are you going to do that to make sure that your personal statement is a true reflection of you, your educational journey, your employment history, your possible volunteer experience, or your hobbies and interests, sports, things like that. What are you going to do to stand out from the pile? I strongly suggest that you don't lie, that you don't fabricate. Perhaps that you're the biggest fan from the age 4 for your degree course, that you've been interested in biochemistry since you started teething, for example. But a way of showing that you've got a gradual interest, or you've got a logical interest in how you've come to be interested in this field or this area, and then what you've done to explore that, to show how you're passionate and dedicated to it, which basically means the admissions tutors thinks that you're likely to stick to the course, that you're going to not drop out, that you're going to achieve, that you're going to get high grades. So obviously it's a reflection on them for how much work you're able to put in, and the likelihood that you'll therefore pass out with honours, I'm assuming. So you've got to make sure obviously that you're going to get your predicted grades, and if your predicted grades for A levels aren't likely to match up with the entry requirements for that course, it may not be worth actually applying for that specific course in the first place. It may be worth looking at, for example, a different institution. Maybe they've got different entry requirements. Maybe they've got like a foundation year or something easy to get in, or maybe like some summer school camps and placements, which sometimes they do, to then maybe get you in a slightly lower offer, or if they're particularly impressed by your application, they might offer you lower entry, or even possibly an unconditional offer, I suppose. But the important thing is that you're going to get the appropriate grades that you are predicted from your tutors or your tutors at sixth form. So for most people, it's the half term in October at the moment. Maybe that you haven't even started your personal statement yet. Maybe people have actually had an initial draft, etc. But now is a pretty good time to try and get it out the way when you've got a couple of months left before the deadline, rather than leaving it too late, and to basically try and get top of the file to the admissions tutors before they've read 3,000 of them. So most people probably take, I reckon, about 4 to 6 drafts of your personal statement to make it outstanding. Maybe the first couple of drafts, if you just throw it in and toss your hat in the ring and see if it was okay, might only be like a 4 or 5 out of 10. So to really kind of tweak it and to make sure that it's of the right tone and it's telling the correct message to the admissions tutors, it might need several drafts from input from several people that you trust or respect. Could be a private tutor like me, I have that service. It could be your tutors at sixth form or your college. It could be your parents. Could be someone who you have, kind of like a professional relationship with, where you can respect their ability to look through spelling, punctuation, grammar, things like that. Even though they're not specifically in the field that you're going to look into, it's useful to get several pairs of eyes on it. But at the end of the day, it is your personal statement, and it's going to be up to you how you send it off and exactly what format. Don't let someone else do it for you and say, I've fixed it for you, it's perfect, it's fine, it's going to get you in. That's not necessarily true. It is yours at the end of the day. You've got to take complete responsibility for it, although get as much help and advice as you can until you're satisfied that it is a true reflection of you. So if it's me personally, we do it on a Google Doc or whatever kind of file format that you prefer, but do it in something that you can share it with and get collaboration with. So if you do it on a Google Doc or equivalent and then share it with the people who you're interested in looking at it, they can then put comments on it, resolve issues, possibly change or edit some of the kind of little bits of spellings or punctuation or whatever it might be, rather than you having to just pop back and change it all, unless I just do it with a highlighter, for example. But they can leave useful comments, directed comments, to make sure that it's of the quality, and I mean absolute quality and standard, that an undergraduate would be expected to communicate with in terms of their skills. So I suggest doing it on dedicated paragraphs first. So an introductory paragraph about why you kind of specifically applying for that course, or paragraphs about how your A levels or your work experience skills or your voluntary work gives you specific experience or skills that match up directly to the course description of the university that you're applying for. So if it was biomed or something like that, for example, where some of the key skills may be timekeeping, analytics, use of data analysis, working as part of a team, leadership skills. There's many skills that you need for all the different types of undergraduate courses, but you've got to be able to show that you already have either the makings of those skills to show that you can then develop them and make them to the level needed at undergraduate level, or you've got a foundation for that because you've done your best to be prepared for it, and therefore you've already got the kind of the effort and the ability to then be trained further in it by those people who've got those skills, so you're worth taking under their wing, basically. If you've done it as one big chunk, it's a bit more difficult to then go back in and chop it and change it around, etc. Whereas if you've done individual paragraphs, even on different pages of the document, you can then quite easily make multiple copies, chop bits out of one, change it, rewrite it again completely underneath it to have a different focus or a different view, and maybe that might then give you the indication later on that how you then splice it back together, it might sound different, or it might have a different tone or a different quality to the admissions tutors when you think, well, I'll do it this way, or here's my plan A, here's my plan B, etc. Why that's useful, I think, is that if you do it in one big block, it's a bit more daunting, whereas you could spend a couple of hours doing each paragraph as saying what you wanted to say in the best possible way, which therefore means then it's in little kind of bite-sized chunks, and it's not as demanding, it's not as difficult, and then you can get help along the way. So let's say if you've done your first paragraph and you've shared that with the people who you trust and you respect, then they could already start giving you feedback and comments on that before you even start the next one. Or you can do it all the different types of paragraphs and then share them around depending on what format you prefer. Sometimes you might have even a couple of versions of the same personal statement for the same institution, and you have to decide which one you prefer, because maybe it says slightly different things. And again, it takes quite a while. It might take several hours to get to the standard that you want, but it's worth the investment of time if it's going to get you on the right course or the right job career. It's really important to make sure that this is exactly how you want it to be, and don't just chuck it in and think, it's okay, it's sufficient. Make sure this is actually. So my main advice for how to make your personal statement unique and how to communicate passionately about why you're interested in that specific course is to think about perhaps a theme or realistically true experience that you've grown up with, or how it's evolved over your time during education or in whatever kind of specific hobbies and interests that you do. So to give you an example, but obviously don't directly use this yourself, please don't plagiarize it or say that that Matt said this, so I'm definitely going to kind of get into my course. It doesn't work like that. But let's say, for example, that when you were younger, you'd been to the doctors and you'd had like a diagnosis of a certain thing, hopefully nothing serious or anything, but that would then give you an inkling or an interest in your own health and your own fitness and why it's important to take care of yourself, and maybe specific medications associated with that condition, or medical interventions that you need to have because of that condition. So let's say it was diabetes or something like that, and let's say you got type 1 diabetes when you were young, and why that's interesting to you and how it's affected your life and how it's given you an impetus to kind of research that yourself and to go on like voluntary courses or placements or to university taster days to look at the current research on diabetes, or the current genetically modified insulin that might be used, or how you've taken interest in maybe the several different types of mechanical instruments that are now available, like insulin pumps or stem cell research or artificial organs, for example, of islet transplants and things like that could be used to therefore treat that specific condition. So let's say you're able to talk about something like that and show therefore that you've got a direct link between your progressive educational journey from when you were diagnosed, or from maybe in primary school or secondary school, or whenever it actually happened, and then to show that you've come on a journey from when it's happened to what you're interested in and how that's kind of shaped your interest to then apply for that specific course. So it might have been through reading scientific journals, it might have been visiting like a university open day, it might have been going on taster courses, it might have been just watching thousands of YouTube videos about diabetes, it may be about fundraising. You might have joined a voluntary organisation to try and raise funds and awareness and education about your specific thing that you've had. So, although that's not lying as such, and it is important to be truthful, because if you're not, you'll get absolutely pulled apart during an interview, and they'll therefore think, well, this isn't a kind of a truthful, moral person who we're going to be happy to have on our course. So don't lie about it, certainly, but make sure that it's elaborated on, that it's effective in what it's trying to convey about how your drive and your desire to be on that course is because of this specific event, or then how it's kind of shaped the rest of your educational journey. There's been several examples of different people who've applied to specific universities, and it can be about maybe a family member who's had a certain type of illness or condition, or yourself, or something you saw on social media, I suppose, or on the news, etc. It's about things that perhaps have inspired you to then look more closely and to then research further that specific field. So maybe it's about cancer, maybe it's about genetic engineering, maybe it's about xenotransplantation of organs. It could be about giving blood, or whatever kind of people who you've come into contact with are interested in, and why that therefore is applicable to your story as such. So that gives it a personal touch, that gives it a unique marketing point, I suppose. It makes it stand out, it makes it look genuine, and rather than just thinking, I've done my GCSEs, I've done my A-levels, what do I fancy doing? Oh, that looks okay, and that university looks okay. There's lots of people who apply to university with exactly that mindset, and unfortunately the admission tutors are able to see through that. Hopefully others should as well. But if it's got a graded interest in something, or if it's got that level of personal investment, that shows that you possibly deserve to be on that course. and that you are going to stick with it, because maybe you do have a personal investment in making sure that you are able to then go into research or find some new drugs, or are able to then help out in production or biotechnology or something like that, the actual making the gubbins of it, or making apps for educational purposes, or making mechanical medical devices. And obviously there's big money in intellectual property of all those different things, and that's where the kind of progressive job interests could be after your degree. Or you could go into PhDs or masters or other professional kind of qualifications after your undergrad that might get you into a job. So the personalised story and anecdote, I think, is actually quite important. I think it does make a big difference to many of the students who I've tried to help with. Some are extreme, and obviously you have to say, well, maybe that's not appropriate, and maybe it doesn't give the right tone. But maybe there's probably going to be a few things in your life that you've experienced, both in health and fitness and work and your hobbies and vocations and things like that, that could be able to come across as why therefore you're dedicated and a useful person to put on these courses. So I think that allows, throughout all the different paragraphs you may include about maybe your A-levels and your hobbies and interests in sports and things, because you can tie those in together if it's usually health related. That then allows you to carefully match up the skills and things that you've developed against the skills and requirements on the university course, of what they want, whether it was, as I said, mentioned earlier, about timekeeping, or for example leadership skills, or working as part of groups, or diagnostics and arrays and things like that, or just being able to have fantastic study skills, because you're going to have to do lots of that at university yourself, lots of self-teaching. So how are you going to marry that up basically and make sure that you are a suitable candidate for those courses or single course that you're applying for? I assume you're going to do up to 5, and make sure that you've, as a major disclaimer as well, make sure that you visit these places. If you are going to apply to University X, go to that town, go to that city, make sure that you've been to the campus, make sure that you've walked around the residences or the halls, make sure that you've researched what's like on the city or your nights out or whatever fun you're going to have, and make sure that it's got all the things there that you want to do, and make sure that the course you're applying for is the course that you're actually genuinely interested in, and it's one that you're going to be able to stick with by doing many hours a week in lectures or labs or whatever the contact hours may be, as well as all the self-study you're going to do. That you're only going to be able to keep going with 3 years of that or more, if you are genuinely interested in it, and that you can prioritise that over many other things in your life as you develop different responsibilities, etc., to make sure that that's something you genuinely want. So I would strongly recommend that you've visited these places, not necessarily just on the virtual tours that they offer, but actually, via car or train or however you're going to get there, even though it does cost money, but get to those open days and make sure it's actually worth it. So as I've said, if you have broken it down into multiple paragraphs or even multiple personal statements to decide on which one you like, and you've got detailed feedback from either a private tutor or your personal tutor or whoever kind of looks after those things at your college, and you think that that personal statement has complete impact on the reader, that it's going to make the person thinking that you are passionate and determined and driven to achieve on that course, and that you're going to do whatever is necessary to get onto the course in terms of your A-levels or other things you might be taking to actually get onto it in the first place, and that when you're there, that you're not going to drop out, that you're going to be there for 100%, make sure that it's absolutely what you want to do, and that it's a major stepping stone to your career, whether you explicitly spell out that you're doing this undergraduate course to get into this PhD program or this master's or this kind of professional qualification afterwards, and therefore that my job after the end of all that is to do this. I want to be a professional biochemist or a professional kind of researcher in whatever field that you're specifically interested in, if you talked about those themes. So whatever you do, I wish you the very, very best of luck in both writing the personal statement and your UCAS application, and I hope it's something that gets you where you want to be in the course that you want to do, and hopefully that's going to lead to the the job or the career that you're interested in as